Okay, so this video is talking about how to find an equation of a perpendicular line. So just start off with what is a perpendicular line. So what you'll be given is an equation already. So a line that's perpendicular to that means that when they cross over, they create a right angle. So we do need to, if you haven't already watched the reciprocal video, you need to be watching that first, because if you're not sure how to find reciprocals, you're going to find this quite difficult. So with these ones, for example, this e.g. here, we need to find the equation of the line which is perpendicular to the one that's given in the question, and we're told which point it will be going through. So this one we're given y equals 2x plus 1, and it's going to be passing through 2 and 5. Now it's a very similar method to what we've done before with parallel lines. The only difference is that there's a couple of steps at the beginning extra, which is what I've written here. Okay, so I will go through them, and then at the same time I'll actually start answering the question. So step one is that we need to work out the gradient of the line that's given. So we're given this line here. You've just got to remember that the gradient is always the number in front of the x, which is 2 for this one. Okay, make sure that it is in the correct form as well, so make sure it's just y equals, because if it isn't, you do need to rearrange it first and then work out what number will be in front of the x. Okay, so we know that the gradient is we know the gradient is 2 of the line y equals 2x plus 1. Now, because the two lines aren't going to be parallel, because if they were parallel, they would have the same gradient, but because they're not parallel, they're perpendicular instead, we've got to do this step here, which is find the negative reciprocal of the number in part 1. So the reciprocal, which is what we did in another video, is 1 divided by whatever number that you had. Okay, and it means that if you multiplied the reciprocal with the number, that you would get 1. So because the number that we have is 2, okay, so we're going to do 1 divided by 2, which you could write as 0.5 or 1/2. I'm going to be using a half, okay, but it doesn't actually matter. Okay, now it says negative reciprocal, so we can't just leave it as 0.5 or a half. It's actually going to be negative. Okay, so if it's the opposites, let's say that for step 1 the gradient was -2, that means that for step 2 you're going to have positive a half. Okay, so the signs between step 1 and step 2 should always be different. Okay, step 3, that's the same as what we did with the parallel lines. Okay, so this is where we write y equals whatever the gradient is, which we know is -1/2, x plus c. We use this coordinate that we've got here, so I'm going to write it here again. Okay, so the first number represents the x and the second one represents the y. So it means that when x is 2 and we put it in here, y has to be 5. Okay, and by using these two numbers we can then work out what c is. So we've got 5 equals -1/2 times by 2 plus something. Okay, now a half times 2 is just 1/2, but because it's negative, it will become -1/2, or just -1. Okay, now we just want c on its own. At the moment we've got this -1, so we need to add 1 onto both sides. I'm going to try and squidge it in. Okay, so we end up having, so 5 plus 1 is 6, so c is equal to the number 6. So our final answer will be the same as what we've written here, but we can now change the c to be number 6. Okay, so all that work is just for that little answer at the end. Okay, so step 1, find the gradient of the line that's given in the question. 2, find the reciprocal and then change the sign, so whether it's positive here, then it will become negative, or vice versa. Then step 3 is what we did for the parallel line ones. That's where we write this equation here, so y equals whatever the gradient is, x plus c, and then we use the coordinate that's also given in the question to then work out what C is. Okay, and we just do that by substitution. Okay, we're going to do another one, so I'm going to just turn over. Okay, so EG2, find the equation of the line perpendicular to the equation y equals negative 3x plus 10 and passes through 6 and 2. So the first thing I want to do is just label these x and y because that's going to help me out later. Okay, I'm not going to rewrite all the steps, obviously, because you've seen them before, so I'm just going to write step 1 and then the answer, step 2 and so on. So step 1. So step 1 was we have to work out the gradient of the line that's given to us already. So this is the equation that we're given. Okay, the number in front of the x is negative 3 and it is in the correct form because it's y equals. So step 1, the gradient is negative 3. Okay, step 2. So this is where we need to find the negative reciprocal. So we're just going to work out the reciprocal first. So the reciprocal of minus 3 would be, so it's just 1 divided by negative 3, okay, which is the same as minus 1/3. You can do a decimal, but again, it's easier to do it as a fraction, especially ones like this, because this would give you a recurring decimal. But as we've said here, because this is negative, this must have a different sign to do the negative reciprocal. So the perpendicular gradient must be positive 1/3. Okay, so that's the easiest thing. Just make sure that they've always got different signs. So step 1 had a negative, so that means that this one must be a positive. Okay, you can write a plus there, but as we know, we're a little bit lazy and we don't normally write adds in front of numbers. Okay, so step 3 is the bit that we've been doing before. So we need to write the equation. So y equals 1/3 x plus c. Okay, and then I labelled here which one's x and which one's y, so we need to substitute those in. So y is 2, so 2 equals 1/3 times by 6 plus c. Okay, so if we've got 6/3, that's the same as 2, so 2 equals 2 plus c. Okay, again, we just want c on its own, so to do that we need to subtract 2 from both sides. 2 subtract 2 is just 0, so c is nothing. So then we come back to this part here, so it'll be y equals 1/3 x. Now you can write plus 0, but plus 0 doesn't do anything, it doesn't change the line. So that is the answer, y equals 1/3 of x.